where do you think the opportunity zones are for real estate investors given the current climate, or are you completely bearish on it that it's going to level down for the next 5 or 10 years?
Well, we're in the middle of a housing crisis. Yeah. There's no doubt about it. That is going to drive the real estate market. We're just not bringing enough units to the market. We're not bringing them to fast enough. And it's not going to be solved by some government intervention. It's going to be solved by the private sector.
That's why I wanted him to come here and answer that question, is they're looking 10 years out, right? So when we're take that to like a residential home purchaser, a lot of times when I'm giving people advice, I'm like, what does the next 5 to 10 years look like for you? The people that call and they're like, I just want to buy something quick and do a quick flip. And I'm like, you can do that, but there's a giant risk that the market dries up in June. And if you get stuck holding this, like, can you actually carry that from a financial perspective?
So I'll read the official biography. I'll tell you how I know Darren, and then I'll let him explain a little bit of what he's doing right now, because I've experienced before where people read my bio and it's like 3 years old and not accurate at all. With over 20 years of experience in real estate investing and 250 doors in his portfolio, Darren's passionate about sharing knowledge he's gained as a developer and an educator. He currently manages a portfolio of properties valued at over $30 million and recently devoted his efforts to help solve the Canadian housing crisis through development. He has a number of projects online right now that he's working through, so we'll talk a little bit about the pain points of development in the GTA. I think when I think of Darren, I met him through Scott McGilvery. We were at his events. Darren was one of the featured speakers on a regular basis, and then we started networking outside of those events. Darren went on, started doing his own thing, and we kept in touch over the years. And what's really cool about Darren that I find is always looking for knowledge and always searching and trying new things. I find people that succeed typically adapt to the marketplace. A lot of times people that got some onus of success because they figured something out one time and they think that that's going to work forever, tend to be stuck in the past forever and they don't grow. So Darren, do you want to give people a little bit of an idea of, from we met to maybe today, what brought you to where you're at in development and education?
Well, I think for me, it was a natural progression. As probably many of you who are in the investing space and even in the real estate space, you get good at something, start maybe small with baby steps, and then you eventually want to almost graduate to something a little bit bigger. I think it's natural in life. I think it's natural in business. And so for me, getting into the real estate market, getting things like purpose-built duplexes and triplexes was great, and I loved it. And when I started, it was really a fascinating process. And the next logical progression was bigger transactions, bigger deals, bigger properties, more capital, more investors, and that just kind of allowed me to grow and progress on both sides, both as an investor, as a business owner. And that's been kind of my journey. It's just been a natural progression through the years.
Break that down in chunks for the people listening and watching. How long did it take you to enter your first real estate investment and then maybe get to a point where you felt like you understood that asset class before moving to the next one?
Well, I took the path of trial and error. I would not recommend it. I didn't really have a lot of mentors in the early days. I was just, I worked over in Japan for a year. My previous life was, I was in musical theater, and I was over in Japan. I saved up a bunch of money while I was over there. I came back and I had no idea what to do with this money. And so I thought, well, I should probably buy some real estate because I've heard that's a good investment.
Where did you hear that? Just anecdotally?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so bought my first rental property. Well, it actually wasn't planning to be a rental. It was supposed to be a flip. And I bought it. It was in Alberta. That's where I grew up.
What year?
2002.
Okay.
And so I bought it from the builder, and I was going to finish the basement. I was going to turn around and sell it and make profit and go on to the next one. And I was going to supplement my acting career with real estate. And then I couldn't sell the property because the builder...
So you didn't hire Prime.
Because the builder still had lots available, and why would you buy this price property from me when you could just go buy it from them? And so I rented it out for 4 years, and then 4 years later, it almost doubled in price. And so I took that money and I went and I scaled my portfolio, and I ended up buying 3 within 6 months of selling that one property. And then I was like, hey, this real estate thing is pretty cool. I like that. And that's when I brought my money to Ontario and started buying in and around the Toronto area. And then of course, Toronto has done what it's done over the last couple decades. And I bought some properties in some fringe areas in Toronto, and for $395,000, I think, at the time, and now they're worth $2.4 million. And so you just, you get that large equity appreciation, and then you take that capital and you just start, sort of building your portfolio based on that. But again, I'm not going to sit up here and tell you like this was my grand plan and I was so incredible at what I did. I literally got, I think, lucky a couple times, because you could very easily have bought in a property in Alberta and not seen any increase for 10 years, which is what I've seen over the last decade in Alberta. So I just kind of hit it right in Ontario or Alberta, and I hit it right in Ontario. And so that's what's really allowed me to sort of scale and grow. But now it's much more strategic in what I do.
And so when you went from one to a couple units, was it the same builder, same area that you purchased in, or did you go around?
That was the only one I bought in Alberta. And then I moved to Ontario, and I started buying purpose-built rentals. Not purpose-built rentals, but I started buying for the purpose of renting out the properties.
And when you would make those acquisitions, what were you looking for? Like, what were the leading indicators of this would make a good investment for me?
I was really just looking for cash flow, something that I didn't have to put money out every single month. And that was really the only factor that I was seriously considering, because I didn't really know about, what the market was capable of, at that point. I was just like, does the rent cover what my expenses are? And if it does, then that's a purchase that I would be interested in making.
Yeah. And I think in the current state of real estate investing, I think we've all gone back to first principles, right? Where I think a lot of people over the last, call it 5 years specifically, projecting strictly on passive appreciation, not taking into account what the actual cash flow of the property is going to be, what the lending rates are going to be. And now I think first principles are back to baseline. What do you think the state of the real estate industry looks like in the next 10 years? Like, where do you think the opportunity zones are for real estate investors given the current climate? Or are you completely bearish on it that it's going to level down for the next 5 or 10 years?
Well, we're in the middle of a housing crisis. Yeah. There's no doubt about it. And that is going to drive the real estate market. We're just not bringing enough units to the market. We're not bringing them to fast enough. And it's not going to be solved by some government intervention. It's going to be solved by the private sector. And so I think, you're seeing all of these incentives being brought down from the federal level, from the provincial level, from the municipal level, and all of it points to purpose-built rental. Mm-hmm. They're trying to incentivize developers to put rental units on the market. And so I think that if you're in that space over the next 10 years, even over the next short term and also long term, I think there's tremendous opportunity there, because you're also, and I'm a bit bullish on multifamily. Like, sure. We're building a lot of purpose-built, like boutique apartment buildings, if you will. So 8 and 10 unit buildings, and I'll explain maybe why we're doing that number specifically. But for me, when you look at how those buildings are evaluated, they're evaluated based on their revenue, not based on comparable properties next door. So even if the property values start to decline in Toronto and anywhere else that they have over the last couple months, our buildings continue to increase in value because our rents continue to go up. And so we're building these assets. We're getting long-term financing from CMHC on a 50-year amortization, which allows us to go up to 95% loan to cost on our builds. So we're leaving a very little amount of capital in the deal. And then we're just riding out the real estate market for the next decade on this kind of fixed cost financing backed by the government of Canada.
I mean, that's why I wanted him to come here and answer that question, is they're looking 10 years out, right? So when we're take that to like a residential home purchaser, a lot of times when I'm giving people advice, I'm like, what does the next 5 to 10 years look like for you? The people that call and they're like, I just want to buy something quick and do a quick flip. And I'm like, you can do that, but there's a giant risk that the market dries up in June. And if you get stuck holding this, like, can you actually carry that from a financial perspective? I think a lot of people don't understand their fiscal position in life, right? And I think your analysis of why you're doing those buildings gives a snapshot of where you think the general market's going. Obviously, if you're putting your actual capital into the market, I think you understand that we are a good place to live and people want to live here. and they're going to need housing. It sounds like, and I want to ask you two questions. It sounds like you're seeing from both the federal level, provincial level, but on the lending side, more of an appetite to fund those types of developments versus I can tell you the banks are very, very bearish on the investment and residential development side. And I'm talking sales. It's a very different story there. They're completely risk averse to doing large commercial deals, investment deals. They don't want to really touch it. But it sounds like you're getting a very different appetite from them of, no, we want to do this as well, right?
We're getting it also from the lending side, but also from the municipal approval side. So when we go to apply for a minor variance application, for instance, which we often have to do, a lot of our buildings are what they call as of right. So we don't have to go for any kind of zoning change in the core of Toronto, but we do need a minor variance. And having that on the application that this is a purpose-built rental, the city has, targets that they're trying to meet for purpose-built rentals. So those applications often get check marks across the board, not only from the regulatory perspective, but also from the financing perspective. And I've been kind of on my soapbox as of late saying there's a lot of people contributing to the housing crisis right now with going and buying apartment buildings and removing tenants and increasing the value of those rents by doing renovations. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's an amazing strategy, and a lot of my friends are in that business. But I'm trying to help the housing crisis, and that just means adding units to the market, not increasing the value of the existing stock. And that's why the financing that I'm getting is also following that, because their CMHC is really just saying, look, if you're building something new, we want to support that and we want to add more units to the market. Therefore, we're going to give you really good terms, and we're going to give you these terms for extended period of time, as long as you meet the criteria of either efficiency, affordability, or accessibility.
And what I like about that, and I think a takeaway for everybody listening and watching right now, would be find out what the cities you're working in are looking for and find a way to partner with them. And it doesn't have to be an adversarial relationship. One of the biggest things I learned was kind of making them think it's their own idea by finding out what they actually want to accomplish versus going in and saying, hey, we're going to rezone this to this. And you getting somebody behind a desk, it's like, you're sure not, right? And you end up in a very different position with the city, because it can be very difficult once you enter a relationship with somebody that way to overcome that. Have you had any challenges development-wise dealing with the city?
No, everything's been perfect.
No, it's been great.
Yeah, not a single challenge. We were having so many challenges. I had one this week where, we're doing purpose-built, an 8-unit, right on, for those of you that know Toronto, on Dufferin, which is a main thoroughfare. And we have to do new water and sewer. It's part of the regulation. When you build a new house, you have to do new water and sewer. And so, the city contractor comes in and gives us a price based on our drawings. They show up on site. The drawings are not exactly accurate. They're like, we dug up a few things, and, we got a tunnel underneath this line, and we got a hydro line. We need an extra $400,000 on a $2 million project.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we can't do that. That's not even a possibility. So, you're just kind of trying to figure out how to make that happen. That's your job as a developer almost. It's just problem solving essentially time after time. But what changed recently, and this is what's been a bit of a differentiator, is that we used to have to go to site plan approval with anything under, anything over 4 units. And now anything under 10 units, we avoid that process. Okay. And so that was Bill 23. Yeah. Bill 23 said anything 10 units and under, you don't have to go to site plan approval. So what are we doing now? 8 and 10 unit buildings all day, every day. Because in the core of Toronto, they're zoned for multifamily. So we don't need a zoning change. We're essentially as of right, and we go straight to building permit with maybe a minor variance application. So time to market is the thing that's really, a nice piece to have. So we can be having a permit in hand, I say, in 12 months. Wow. And we can be building within another 12 months. So within 2 years, we can add another 8, 10 unit building to the market with government-backed financing.
That's fantastic. And I think a lot of developers in the GTA area, you're talking 5 to 10 years for some projects with the red tapes once you get into really big buildings, and then forecasting what that looks like with the market and everything else can be very difficult. Where now you're in a zone where clearly they have a mandate to accomplish something, and you're working with them to accomplish that. I think that's super, super insightful. Now, switching more to the business side of things, from buying your single family home by accident to doing what you're doing now, What are some key takeaways in terms of building your team, running your life so that you're not falling forward all the time, making mistakes? Like, what are some things that you can impart in people? Because a lot of people here own their own businesses in different capacities and are always looking to grow.
Well, I think the biggest thing for me was hiring an executive assistant, which was a bit of a challenge at first. I tried to do it like many people do. I think we often try to do it on the cheap, or we go and get an intern, or we do this kind of stuff, or we think like, oh, I'm going to hire someone from the Philippines or Indonesia. I did all those things. They didn't work at all. And so I ended up having to bite the bullet and pay someone a decent salary, but I got a good quality individual. And then I just continued to do that to build out my team. So, for me now, it's I'm generally not even here at this time of the year. I'm usually in Costa Rica. I spend January through April down there. And because I've got a team that continues to do what they need to do here on the ground, and that's really been, it's kind of me living out my why I got into real estate was so that I could spend time away and spend time doing the things that I want to do, like being here today, and not really have to worry, like you said, about, the business continuing to operate.
Yeah. I mean, if you took me and him 7 years ago, we'd be like in our phones, stressed out. I got to step out for a second. Like you wouldn't have this type of interaction. And I think that's a great indicator that you can build that. Now I will push back on one thing, because I have 2 VAs from the Philippines that are fantastic, but I had to go through a whole bunch that were not, right? And there is a value, in my opinion. One of the reasons why actually we really went that way was in 2020 when the lockdown happened, everybody was getting paid to stay at home and nobody actually wanted to come to work. We kept hiring people, and then they'd be like, yeah, sure, I'll be there 5 days a week. And then they'd show up like 1 day a week. So we're like, you know what? I'm going to work with a VA for now. I'll pick up my shovel, do all the work myself. It took an inordinate amount of training. And now one of them is unbelievable. Runs my email, runs my calendar, because we all know that if I did that, I'd triple book every single meeting known to man. But I think what he said is super key for all of you is find somebody to do life with. It can be your partner. If you're running a business, an executive assistant, a VA is one of the best things I'd recommend to everybody. You should read Dan Martell's book, Buy Back Your Time. I talked to Dan last week actually about going to Kelowna. Randomly. This guy's blowing up everywhere, and he does this entrepreneur run in Kelowna hike, but he's talking about living life by design, which is why I'm hosting this event. Is everybody here has the capacity to do that in whatever way that means for them. Doesn't mean you have to invest in Ontario. Doesn't mean you don't. Doesn't mean you have to be a real estate agent. Doesn't mean you do, right? I think you really need to almost go through trial by error to find where your niche is. And if it is in the real estate business, what part of that business you want to be in, because he's super niched in what he's interested in. You'll hear AJ, I think, has so much knowledge in what he's interested in and his passion. Ryan as well. And I think that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring you here. I'm curious, just completely out of the box now, what does the future look like for you? Like, what is something that you think is a unicorn moonshot, but may actually go somewhere in terms of the real estate market?
Like what I want to accomplish?
What you want to accomplish, or blockchain or crypto or tokenization of real estate, anything kind of out of the box?
I think international investing has really piqued my interest as of late. And we've got a project in Costa Rica we're building 6 luxury homes down there. I think that lifestyle piece, I'd love to be able to develop in all of these different locations and then just be able to travel around the world, stay in properties that I've built or I've developed. I think that's something that I would really enjoy doing. And I think for me, the next step is also just finding somebody who I can do that with. I think I've had partners in the past that have been interested in my business and things like that. But the thing that I realized this year was like, you can do all this work and you can spend all this time and this energy and this money, and you can build your wealth, you can build your portfolio, you can do all this kind of stuff. But ultimately, it sounds kind of sad, but if you don't have somebody to share it with, it becomes like this thing where you're like, what am I actually doing all this for? Yeah. And so for me, I think that's the next thing.
Well, if he keeps coming to our prime meetups, maybe one day we'll find something there. The next one, actually, I meant to say this in my little intro. We had so much interest in this one. We had over 80 registrations. Typically, not everybody's going to show up anyways, but I'm actually really excited for everybody that did show up. The next one we're already planning in May. It's going to happen in Grand Bend, and it is escalating quickly to the point where we have a motel owner that's a client of mine we're talking to, plus a party bus to take us to a lakefront property, and have some other speakers. And we'll actually make sure everybody here is tagged in our CRM, so when we send out those invites, you get those invites to the events, because then you get the opportunity to see Darren by chance next time he comes to an event and see that next stage of where he's at as well. I do want to touch on one thing before I let you go and we go to the next speaker. Marketing and social media. I want to talk about it because I want to kind of pull back the veil for people. People have a guttural reaction when they hear those words. I do too. Real estate or social media is fake. A lot of what you see online is snake oil, smoke and mirrors. I'm actually going to put out a full blog post about how I really feel about it next week. That pretty much everybody in this room, though, is the same person on social media or in person as I've met from like day one. You are as well. How do you use marketing and social media to amplify what you're doing and attract the right people and potentially the right Mrs. Voros?
Well, you said it in the beginning. You said, like, I try not to sell. I try to educate. I try to show people what's going on in my life, good and bad. I think that, my YouTube channel, I launched it, I think it was 3 years ago.
Give it a plug so they can write it down.
I mean, it's simple. It's Darren Vorros. But I started in the middle of the pandemic, which was great. I had this really captive audience. But I was just educating people. I wasn't trying to sell anything. I wasn't trying to, do anything like that. And I found that people reacted to it so strongly. And for me, that's always been my give back element, is like, here's my experiences in the real estate investing space. And here's the things that I've done well. Here's the things that I haven't done well. I share those experiences, and it's literally 10x'd my business. And I know that people often have this, like you say, this guttural reaction to be like, I don't want to do social media. It is the thing that will change your business, and it will have the ability to change your life if you want to put some energy and effort into it.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say to that point, the key is not treating it like business. Like, I treat it like when you're writing something on text or you're talking to a camera, like I'm talking to Brian or I'm talking to Darren. I think that's the real key, is you don't have to put this facade as if you're somebody that you're not actually. Because if you do, you're going to attract the wrong types of people into your ecosystem, and you're going to repel the right ones. Versus when you share your imperfections, that actually is what will attract the right people, because there's a certain amount of accountability in that. The best relationships with clients, agents, people that are in this room that I made are, things are going to be messy. It's, everything I'm saying to you sounds so good. And I'll say this to clients, like, the pitch sounds amazing. It's still going to be really hard. Like, we're going to screw up. Things are going to happen. Maybe a showing request doesn't get noticed, but we have 4 people watching it. We'll send it to you. Like, when you really communicate with the people in your ecosystem, there's a level of trust that develops, and you can do that online on social media. So I'd recommend everybody give Darren a follow. The podcast will have all the links in it if you want to go online as well, but I definitely encourage anybody to meet him after. Any questions for him on the development side, the marketing side, going to Costa Rica, or any prospective suitors for Darren? Gotham?
For the boutique hotels, is that in response to the Airbnb regulations coming out?
Sorry, boutique. We're doing boutique apartment buildings, not hotels. Yeah. So we do purpose-built, like 8 and 10 unit buildings in Toronto, which pretty much fit on any residential lot, and that's why we're doing them. So I don't need a special zoning. I don't need any kind of like irregular lot. I don't need to assemble anything. I'm literally going in, and I could do this on almost every single lot in the city of Toronto. Has the ability to do this.
Yeah, we're gonna go way over time with these podcasts. I hope you guys are ready. We'll take a 5-minute break in a second. Go ahead, Derek.
With their CMHC financing, where are you focusing your energy to get those points on the MLI Select?
Yeah, great question. Depending on the province that you're doing it in, I would say in Ontario, it's efficiency all the way. If you're in Alberta, you can do affordability. Accessibility seems to be the one that nobody really is interested in. And we are doing a combination of the two on some of our builds. We're doing 25% above the code for efficiency and 1 or 2 affordable units. That is also the combination that you can use. Yeah.
Ryan?
On the Costa Rica builds, how did you find the team that you could trust down there in the development standpoint, or did you bring a team from here down there, or how does that work?
Yeah, great question. Just like a lot of other things we do in business, it was just a little bit of networking and meeting some people. The real estate purchase was pretty straightforward through a realtor down there. And then I got introduced to some various people, and the architect ended up being a friend of mine, and we started working together. And he'll manage the build itself. He lives right next door to it, and I'll go back and forth as well just to kind of check in on things. But he's built multiple projects down there that I've been able to see over the last year or so. So it's been nice to be able to see the quality and the speed and efficiency that he can operate on. And we kind of got into an exclusive arrangement where he wasn't going to take on any other project, which is really important for me because, when people start to build their businesses and they want to scale, all of a sudden it's like you get dropped and you get kind of lost in the mix. So that was an important distinction for me.
Every property management company ever. They're great for the first year, and then as they're scaling, they just drop off a cliff. Fahad?
What's your ideal lot size for the 8 to 10 unit apartment?
We can go like 35 by 100 or, like it doesn't need to be big, right? I mean, I think because, like I say, we have to go in for minor variance often, but they'll allow us to push to the property lines in a lot of cases. We are often getting parking exemptions or no parking at all. We have an 8 unit on Dufferin that has no parking. We have an 8 unit, 2 8 units that we're actually adding garden suites and laneway suites. We're removing parking and adding another unit. They're just really pro development in Toronto and pro, adding units to the market. So Toronto doesn't care about parking. They don't need more cars. They need more housing for people. So, as much as your neighbors hate the fact that you don't have any parking because they're like, there's going to be cars on the street and everybody's going to be, busy, and like the city doesn't care about that kind of stuff, right? They're just like, yep, on a standard lot, you can do this. And so just to let you know, we're doing 3-story builds, right? So 2 in the basement, 2 in the main floor, 2 in the second floor, and 2 in the third floor. That's kind of our 8 unit mix. When we do 10, we do 4 in the basement. Those are a little bit bigger.
2 front and back.
Yeah. And they're like usually bachelor units in the basement. And then we do 2 bedrooms, on the main floor, second floor, and third floor. So that's kind of our 10 unit mix that we do.
Amazing.
You prefer laneways though, ideally?
If we can get a laneway, yeah. But if we don't have it, it's fine. We can do it without it. Yeah.
I think you can see where the puck is going to, right? Like as you're talking, I'm thinking, well, London has their parking allotment, but they want downtown to be super walkable and bikeable, and they don't want cars downtown. I can see in 15 years or 10 years or 20 years, London being in a place where they're like, you know what, we need to review what we actually need for parking, given we want it to be a walkable city when you're downtown. So, I mean, look for earmarkers in other markets as to what's coming to your market. And I think it's interesting to watch the GTA to Oakville to Kitchener to Hamilton. London's Kitchener now. And now Sarnia is London, right? And you can almost see, well, what did the path look like in the last 20 years? And going to emerging markets is how a lot of people are getting started now, right? So very insightful. Any other questions? Go ahead.
What's the job description of your executive assistant?
Oh boy, it's yeah. It started
ChatGPT.
It started something a little bit different for sure. I think it started out where she was literally just managing my email and my calendar. Those were the 2 main things. And then she's very skilled at design and things like that. So she ended up being more of like, she does all those things, but she's also branched out doing a little bit more of my social media, my marketing. I could almost call her my marketing and sales director as well. But initially, I think what you really need as a business owner is calendar management and email management. Those are the 2 most important things. When you can take that away, you can just free up your mind. Imagine not having to check your email and getting a brief at the end of the day and saying, these are the things you really need to focus on. Everything else I've taken care of. When you free up all that time, there's just so many other things you can do to be productive, and email is not one of them.
Yeah, and the biggest misconception about me is I'm too busy. And that, what he just said, is the answer to that question, is I don't actually have to handle those things. And the way you actually, here's some secret sauce behind it and how you probably went through it too, is you have to work to teach the person how to do the thing. So like you would take an hour time block to go through email reviews and explain to them what you red light, what you green light, what you red light, and what gets through and what doesn't, who I'm not the answer for, where I want to answer everybody's questions. Shannon runs the company. She runs HR, everything, contracts, transaction coordination, all the money. So I stopped answering those questions because I would often give a wrong answer and then cause more issues than I would help. And RR, who a lot of you know, you've dealt with on emails before, she's a monster. She's operations, right? You got a girl who's really good at design. Mine's an operations coordinator. She loves organizing everything across the company, but it takes a lot of effort to teach them to think how you think. Don't get frustrated with them because it's not going to happen overnight. Have empathy and give clear communications. Also, 2 other hacks of going down a wormhole. I need to stop. One is a clear definition of done. That was a mistake I made in the past where I'd be like, let's do this. Here's a task. Let's go accomplish this with no explanation of what the definition of done actually looks like. And here's what will save all of your time. If you're working with a team and that team has a question, 1-3-1 rule. They have to come to you with 3 potential solutions for the question they have and which one they think is the right one. And you will probably have 70% less questions. Any other questions before we wrap it up for a break?
You have to have 3 solutions before you ask the question.
That's right. Yeah. Actually, that'd be genius. That's like next time I'm with you, Mike, I'll come to you with 3 solutions of how to fix my cast so I'm not losing my reel. All right, awesome. Okay, we're gonna take a 5-minute break and then we'll get AJ up and then we'll do Ryan and then Azra and we'll be good to go.